welcome back. Here we are, we're doing it. It's episode 47. Clayton here with the Should Be Known podcast. And I feel to apologize for last episode, just the production quality of it. I had the camera pointed to me, the lens was, it's zoomed in, so I was like shooting my ear half the time, and the sound also was embarrassing. So hopefully the content quality, the ideas made up for that, hopefully. And I hope they will this time too. So I did get a kind of selfie stick, but a gimbal actually, but it was, battery was dead when I just went to use it, even though I had battery last time I turned it on. Anyway, so I'm using my trusty arm. So I'll be switching arms. Not sure how, because I've got paper here that I've got to also hold. But you get to hear some great content about psychological principles today, and see a little bit of this beautiful little area in Kansas. So yeah, we're going to talk about principles today, principles of psychology. Why are we talking about principles? What's even a principle? A principle is like a compact little truth or something. In science, basically the same thing we have in science with laws, quote unquote, that you discover. They're really principles. If you do this, that will happen. In physical science, you move a charge next to a conductor, and or you move a magnet next to a conductor, and it creates a charge in the conductor. It makes the electrons move. That's a principle, I guess. So there are many more in the physical world, of course. Everything you discover, the way it works, is a principle. And we have the same in psychology. Bunches of them. So, but people don't really talk about them in psychology. It's kind of weird. Why? They don't really realize what they're doing. They're not self-conscious of what you're thinking about. You kind of assume a bunch of stuff. And I think that needs to change if we're going to understand psychology better. So, principles counteract each other, and they work together, and together they make, they explain why the world works. Let's take some aerodynamics. You've heard the thrust, drag, weight, lift forces that act on an airplane, right? And when they're balanced, then the airplane is in straight and level flight. So they say. If you have thrust, the airplane, propeller is moving, let's say, it moves the airplane forward. And if that keeps going, it'll just kind of infinitely, I guess, go forward if you just keep the thrust. But you've got another principle, that's drag, kind of pulling the other direction, right? Keeps it from going too fast, which is kind of a good thing, really, and in most cases, I guess. So they work together, they counteract each other. The whole lift and weight thing, the weight pulls the airplane down to the ground, the lift, raises it to the sky. If they work together, if they work together, it'd just go straight up, would never come down. But you've got gravity to counteract that, and so you've got to understand how the principles work together. That's a really kind of elementary example, maybe, of principles in the physical world. Psychology is, I would strongly argue, is not in the physical world. It is it is a spiritual thing. It's in the mind. And in my opinion, the mind is not a physical thing. Yeah, we have brains, all that, but and maybe this is a discussion for another day, and maybe I shouldn't have even brought it up. But you still have principles in psychology, many of them. In spiritual stuff, you have principles, we could say. So, what are some principles of psychology? I asked ChatGPT, I'd asked it before about different theories of psychology and the principles that go along with them, and then I turned it around and was like, okay, give me maybe 12 or so principles of psychology and then the theories that are kind of tied to them. And then it started listing those off. I think it did a fair job. There are certain things that AI is good for, and of course we can't depend on it too heavily or trust it too much, like can't trust anything too much. Here's a principle: thoughts shape emotion and behavior. That's really too nebulous to count as a principle, but core principle: people are not disturbed only by events, but by their interpretation of events. Main implication: changing thinking patterns can change emotional states and behavioral habits. Associated theories: cognitive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, rational emotive behavior therapy. I don't even know what that is. Schema therapy. Example: I failed, I'm worthless, produces depression. Changing the interpretation changes the emotional outcome. So I think that's a fair enough principle, right? Emotions are associated with thoughts, and whether they're caused by thoughts is maybe another question, but changing your thoughts, which you can consciously do, can change your emotions, right? So I think that's a true principle. I think anybody would agree, and the whole cognitive behavioral therapy is based on that. So that's one principle of psychology, right? Behaviorism. Behavior is learned through reinforcement. The core principle: behavior tends to repeat when rewarded and diminish when punished or ignored. Main implication: habits and emotional reactions can be conditioned and reconditioned. Would anybody disagree with that? You can reward your own or other people's actions, and that reinforcement leads to developing a habit, I guess, of doing that thing. And on the opposite direction, if you negatively reinforce some kind of action, spank yourself, let's say, every time you do something. I don't know if anybody's ever tried that. I'm sure they have, actually. That will supposedly make you break whatever habit you're trying to break by doing that. And that's the foundation of behaviorism. Operant conditioning, classical conditioning. Okay. Let's see. 3, unconscious processes drive much of human behavior. We know which one this is going to be. Oh, where'd it go? 3. It should be. I feel like I'm missing something here. I definitely am. I don't think there's finished printing. But that's going to be Sigmund Freud, right? Big on subconscious, unconscious stuff, driving your actions, motives that you didn't realize you had. And that explains what you're doing and all these kinds of troubles you're in. Does anybody dispute that we do things that we're not conscious of? I think that's a valuable insight. a good enough principle. And my thought on that is that that's actually driven by self-deception, is what drives our consciousness, things out of our consciousness. I don't know that Christ, had a bunch of hidden motives that he didn't realize. Not just because he knew everything, you might say, but because he was completely honest and didn't self-deceive. He'd never given in to temptation, and yeah. Okay, that's a discussion for another day probably too. Where are we? We'd be on number, I've got a bunch here. Number 4, early relationships shape personality and emotional regulation. Core principle, attachment experiences become templates for later relationships and self-contempt. Attachment theory, developmental psychology, emotionally focused therapy. Yeah, so there's this deeply shaped by social systems and context. Yeah, so there's a bunch of principles you could find, and I don't know that really, ChatGPT quite identified them right. I'm sure it didn't. I think an intelligent human could probably refine this, but it's a good kind of start. So those are some of the ones, and I specifically asked AI to identify ones that are commonly recognized in psychology. What do I do with my glasses? Oh boy, I've lost them. I'll try to remember where I left them. Nope. Never mind. Do we need a musical break? I think we need a musical break. Let's go. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, whatever it is. I'm making a compilation of a bunch of my little piano things I've come up with that I did in this podcast, actually, in previous episodes, and I'm planning to release them here soon. So, I don't know if that one will be on it or not. Probably not. Well, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Okay, so I just read you some principles that ChatGPT kind of gave me. It tried to identify them. I think it did good for AI. But what are some other principles that, I didn't read all these, but what are some that modern psychology doesn't recognize? Well, this whole principle we've been talking about self-deception, obviously is one of them, right? It is never said anywhere that, going against our, I don't want to say nobody's said anywhere, but it's in the mainstream, it's definitely not a thing that, going against the truth necessitates a distortion of truth in our minds aimed at justifying us, and all the implications that come with that. So that's one of them, self-deception. What about faith? Does that not play a factor in human action and thought? And I guess it depends on your definition of faith, but one of them that I'm thinking is just the idea that you do something with the idea that you will get something, have a desired result from doing that thing. You sow your field because you want to reap it later. You plant it because you want to reap it later. You go to work because you want to get money. You build a house so you can live in it. I don't know. I'm not sure what I think about that definition of faith, but that's one that I've heard. And you act according to something you can't see, right? You haven't seen the result yet, and yet you're acting. And it's been said that that's the kind of the mainspring of all human action. Okay, well, if that's even a thing, where is that in modern psychology? I mean, maybe they just say, well, it goes without saying. But to me, you've got to tie all these principles in, or else, what are you doing? Where's your logical chain? What about love? Does modern psychology talk about love? Is that not a major motivation for people to do things? If you're not talking about love, how do you expect to explain big range of human action, right, and thought and feeling? And what about its opposite? Depending on what you count its opposite, hate. Doesn't that drive a lot of human action? Kind of the lack of love. You might even say it's the self-deception that is the actions that justify a lack of love and respect. I mean, where's that? And the opposite of faith, I guess you could say, doubt or despair. Well, is despair the opposite of hope? Either way, all these are basic things, I would say. Wouldn't you? And if psychology isn't using those motivations to explain people's actions, I don't know how it expects to account for stuff correctly. What are some other ones that I thought of? Fear. I guess, I think it talks about fear well enough. Whether it thinks about it in a rigorous way, I don't know. Maybe the opposite of fear is faith. Okay, well, so you see there's all kinds of principles, and there's got to be more. And I haven't, made a really decent, worthy attempt at cataloging all the ones I can think of. It's not going to be infinite. I kind of feel, at least, that once you figure out some finite list of kind of motivations, other ones will fall under those. And the goal, of course, guys, is to figure out how these interact with each other, kind of like the lift, drag, thrust, lift, weight, drag, thrust kind of principles, and exactly how they interact, so that you can actually explain what's going on with a person and yourself. So, okay, how am I doing here? Let me check my little outline. Okay, I always like to talk about an analogy, and I've talked about it before. It's been a little while maybe, but the analogy of how a car works. So you've got different principles that explain how a car works, and of course we're comparing operation of a car to how a person works, right? But you can understand basically everything about a car. You've got internal combustion. We're taking a gas car, and that has a mechanical I don't know, force that goes on the piston that drives that, and then there's some other principle that explains how that makes the crankshaft rotate. And I guess as part of the internal combustion, you've got the spark and the gas and the chemistry of that air-gas mixture, and oxygen, and how that all works. And you can get very detailed about it, that motion transfers to the wheels, and then there's friction. That's a necessary principle. And I don't know what other principles are involved, but a person who studies and understands, how a car works, can understand it. And if you bring in your car and it doesn't work, they can take a look at it and figure it out and be like, okay, here's your problem right here. Because they understand all the principles of what's under the hood. Now, can you drive that car and have no clue how it works? You just press the gas and turn the wheel and it goes? You absolutely can. And that's how we kind of are with psychology a lot of times. We don't have to know how it works necessarily. We might scratch our heads and wonder. Some people might investigate it and learn more than others, but you don't really have to know all those details. But if you're a therapist of any kind, or I don't know what other positions in psychology there are. I guess a research psychologist, or social psychologist. I don't know what all the different roles in psychology there are, but if you're a professional in psychology, then you, by gum, ought to understand what's under the hood, right? That's your duty. Just like a doctor understands what's inside of you. You don't have to know what's inside of you until something goes wrong, and then all of a sudden you become interested. And the doctor is, by his profession, he's kind of obligated, right? It's his duty to know as much as he can about what's under the hood. I'd say the same thing for a psychologist. Okay, we're not getting too long here, are we? I had one more thing to say, and that is about the relationship between all these principles, right? So the thing that happens in psychology, at least, I don't know if it happens in the physical world, probably does to some extent, physical science theories, but in psychology, a guy will come upon a great insight, like the subconscious thing maybe, or like the cognitive thing, and kind of ultra hyper focus on that and try to make it explain everything. And really kind of distort reality a little, honestly, to do it at the peril of, or at the expense of, understanding human nature. So you've got these guys who one will focus on behaviorism, and that's fine to focus on that theory as much as you're trying to understand everything that it accounts for. But if you're not thinking about the other principles and you're just focusing on your one, you are never going to get there, my friend. I remember studying in my undergrad this big fat psychology book, and I felt like the whole thing was just one guy's thoughts after another. Oh, this guy said this, and this was his system, and this was his theory, and this is what accounted for human behavior, or whatever. Okay, chapter 2, here's this other guy, and this is what he thought, and this is how he accounted for human behavior. Okay, chapter 3. Here's this other guy, and this is everything he thought and how he thought it accounted for human nature. And at the very end, it's like, okay, there you go. That's psychology. I'm like, what? Yeah, none of that didn't explain anything. And then in the epilogue, the authors were like, we actually think, a combination of these. Some combination of these theories, accounts for human nature. And I was like, okay, that was the best sentence in the whole book. And you spent too little time on that. And way too much time going into detail on every theory. So any psychologist these days, I don't want to say any because who knows what some of them think, but I think most psychologists would agree that no one of these principles accounts for all of human behavior, right? It's going to be a combination. Does anybody know what combination? I don't think so. Do some people have ideas? I don't know. So on that note, let me read to you The Blind Man and the Elephant. So this is somebody put in poetic form. Let's see how well this wind block does. I know you want to look at this. This is my little mic I got. Hopefully the audio is better. That little puffy thing that looks like fur, they used to really make them out of fur, but it does wonders for cutting down wind noise. Without that, it would go constantly when the wind blew. Okay, The Blind Man and the Elephant. This was not in poetic form originally. I don't know who wrote it originally, but I'll read you the poem kind of form. It was 6 men of Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and, happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "God bless me, but the elephant is nothing but a wall." Right? Felt aside the wall. The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, "Ho, what have we here, so very round and smooth and sharp? To me 'tis mighty clear, this wonder of an elephant is very like a spear." And it keeps going. I'll keep reading. The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a snake." The fourth reached out his eager hand and felt about the knee. "What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain to see," quoth he. "'Tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree." All right, his knee is like a tree. The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, "E'en the blindest man can tell this what this resembleth most. Deny the fact who can. This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan." The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, "E'en the blindest..." Oh boy, I just did that. The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a rope." And so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. Maybe I'll do the last part. So often theologic wars, and I'll say that's religion, right? It applies there too. But let's apply that to psychology. So often theologic wars, the disputants, I ween, tread on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prate about the elephant not one of them has seen. So they're all in the wrong. They're all partly in the right, but they're all in the wrong. And Yes, that is also like religion, but it's also about psychology and the principles of psychology. If you focus on just one, you will always be wrong, always be wrong, always be wrong, always be wrong. It is most definitely a combination of principles, just like the physical world, that are needed to explain the way things work. Okay, so there's your little lesson on principles. Doesn't sound that exciting, right? Principles, but it kind of is. The discovery of them is, I don't know, kind of cool, but it's, I don't know, I feel a little bit bogged down at the moment just with all the principles. I feel like I don't know what the next step is, because it just seems like a big pile of them and there's no rhyme or reason to them right now. I often think of a thing I read in a kind of scientific-ish book about the development, discovery of the periodic table, right, of elements. Before that periodic table existed, I imagine, and I think I'm right, that chemistry was just kind of a loose collection of random, principles. If you combine magnesium with, this other element, or if you burn magnesium and combine it with oxygen, then it burns blue or something. And I'm sure I'm getting that wrong, but you got that. And if you pour this chemical and that chemical together, then it smokes and then catches fire. And okay, we'll write that down. We have no idea why, but we'll just write it down, I guess. And if you, I don't know, you can see I could go on with random experiments you can do in science. And, the sky is blue. Nobody knows why, but okay. When the periodic table of elements was put together, I imagine that a lot of stuff came together. And it's like, oh, okay, now I know why you combine magnesium and this and it turns blue. Because, there's this atom and it's got this many protons and this many neutrons and this many electrons, and you combine it with this other atom that's got this many, and so there's this structure and this reaction, and it can all be explained. That's what I would like to see with psychology. A periodic table of elements, organized, these principles being organized, and principles underneath them that will explain them. I think self-deception is a huge key for that. And yeah, okay. That is the goal, guys. Ooh, the sun is peeking through the clouds over there. Going to my first page. This is awkward, isn't it? It's a paper. Sorry, that's probably loud and obnoxious. Okay, one last thought, because I don't know where else to put it. Seems self-deception has integral to it an entanglement of boundaries, or a confusion of boundaries. When you get mad at someone, you make yourself victim of what they did. You take away the separation of what they did and your reaction. It's like an integral part of the self-deception. You don't understand the fact that you can forgive a person and not condone what they did. That it just means you're free from the poisonous canker of having aught against them. So, yeah, just a thought I had recently, that when you kind of enter self-deception, or like I would say, a lot of us are in it already. We don't need to enter it again. We've been living it for years. But when you're in that, You, I think, maybe, as part of the self-deception, you confuse boundaries. Like it's part of your self-justification. If that person made you mad, then you're justified in being mad. If they didn't make you mad, that would ruin your whole justification. If it was the case that, yeah, they did something, but it was your reaction that is troubling you, right? It's really your responsibility. Well, that takes away your whole justification for being mad. You can't really feel justified anymore. And we could go through lots of other examples of how the boundaries, you know, what's your duty to do and somebody else's. When you're in the clear and in the kind of being truthful, you accept responsibility for stuff, and you also don't take on stuff that's other people's responsibility. You don't enable people, I guess, and you don't feel responsible for their emotions. I think there's probably a lot there, guys. Ooh, look at that sun. Okay, well, this is probably about the place we end. It's been good, it's been real. If you've never been to Kansas, it's okay. You probably have a beautiful place by you, but I think you can find beauty just about anywhere in this world, if not anywhere. All right, guys. All right, talk to you later. Bye.